not just talking about any steroids, I'm talking about anabolic steroids and image and performance-enhancing drugs, or IPEDs, because there are an estimated 500,000 to 1 million users in the UK, and no one's talking about it. The closest you get is on social media with discussions about natty or not, naturally built men and women, or people who are enhanced. This particularly is around the discussion with Hollywood actors. And I'm not going to pass any aspersions on who does and doesn't use steroids and performance-enhancing drugs, but it's fair to say this is becoming a bigger and louder debate, not only here in this country, but across in America and the Western world. Now, the Priory Group did some research about 10 years ago that estimated there are about 50,000 people using steroids. Now, their estimate is 500,000 people using steroids. And they say, quote, "We're sleepwalking into a crisis." Now, I know from my time as a GP that actually when it comes to...
I suspend sitting until the vote is complete. Mr. Chair, Lordship, Worship. So I'm proposing to make contributions, if everyone's happy with that. Order. The debate is reconvened and can continue to 5:38 p.m. Dr. Evans.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mandel. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Until we were rudely interrupted by that vote, I was saying we need to talk about steroids in the UK because, as the pro groups have said, we are sleepwalking into a crisis. Now, actually, as a GP, I know that the obesity epidemic has been a real problem, but actually within that is we have a part of the nation getting fitter and part of the nation getting fatter. And so I want to concentrate on the area that's getting fitter. Because of those who go to the gym, we know mainly men, 1 in 10 suffer from bigorexia. Now, what am I talking about bigorexia? Well, it's body dysmorphia, the idea that muscles are not big enough. No matter what you eat, how much you train, you aren't big enough. And that's something that I think is really important, is an epidemic growing in our country, and even more importantly, is actually quite prolific in the gay community. To try and address this debate, I'm going to break it down into 3 sections and talk a little bit about the personal aspect about how I came to this topic, the drivers behind it, and, most importantly, what needs to be done. So from a personal aspect, growing up, I was a fairly normal kid. At the age of 14 or 15, I was playing sport, reasonably academic, but I was an outlier because for my 15th birthday, I saved up £500 to buy a multi-gym. Now, in my head, I wanted to improve my rugby, get girls, fight off bullies, and improve my body image. Now, surprisingly, I was the under-16s first-team captain, but the other 3 fell to one side. And looking back, you think, how many other young men are there who feel like this? And that's 25 years ago. And I think they're the driving forces behind why men want to go to the gym, want to improve their body image. And yet in society, we're saying to them, we need to be perfect. But what is that perfect image? I would happily give way.
For giving way. Social media and reality TV has played a huge part in promoting unrealistic body ideals, and that's something that we don't think about often in terms of men's self-esteem. Does the Honourable Member agree that there should be some greater controls around edited, unrealistic imagery?
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for her intervention. She is spot on. I think the advent of social media over the last 20 years has really brought home that idea of those body images. The likes of Instagram, if you're interested in using the gym and you're a man, you are sent hundreds of images in 30, 40, 50 seconds. Each individual image in itself is not the issue, but the cumulative effect of repeat images sent towards you is such a problem. Now, I would argue the way to solve that is the algorithms within the social media companies to make sure that we have transparency over what is being sent to them. And Facebook talked about, for women in particular, diet pills aimed at young girls was a real problem. This is the next iteration that we're looking at if we don't deal with male body image and body dysmorphia. As a doctor, over the last 10, 15 years, I started to see more and more young men coming into my clinics asking to be prescribed protein powders, creatine. How do I bulk up? Also, I started to see more and more men in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who were using steroids. and having the side effects of it. Some might have simply been, well, bad acne, scarring acne, mood problems, depression. But I have seen those who've had strokes, heart attacks, liver problems, kidney problems, and erectile dysfunction. Now, these are all things that aren't really talked about when it comes to steroids. And the problem of steroids is they work. So people use them and see a drastic improvement. And people who want to build muscle will see that improvement, take the cycle of whatever it happens to be, and then plateau. And that's very hard to deal with because they don't see the gains they were getting under their regime. So they say, oh, I'll only use it once. But once becomes twice, twice becomes thrice, and so on.
Well, the honourable gentleman
Of course, I'll give way.
Richard is listing symptoms. I don't think he mentioned swelling of the brain. Matt Dear, a 17-year-old from Essex, tried to build himself up taking bodybuilding because he was committed to a career serving in the armed forces. Took pills for £30 and his brain swelled up and he died tragically. His memory has gone on and helped educate children in the community. But is he concerned that people can take these things once and it is terminal?
The Honourable Member for Southend and good friend makes an incredibly important point. These are dangerous prescription drugs if not used properly. And there's a plethora of side effects that aren't talked about, from the short acute stuff that could mean you have swelling of the brain, could mean you have a clot or a heart attack, or the long-term effects of things like depression, scarring acne, or erectile dysfunction, which particularly for young men can have a huge psychological effect when they're trying to find partners. So he's absolutely spot on, and my heart goes out to the family of Matt, and I'm pleased that there is a memorial for him to suggest that. Now, as a politician, it takes the role of us as responsible elected members to think about what we can do. Now, the obvious area that I get directed to is sport. And actually, it's quite hard to dope in sport, especially if you're an elite athlete. People do it, it does happen. But actually, to develop into that area, the culture is quite strong not to do so. In fact, as a GP, I've had many athletes who come to me who want to be elite athletes, refusing to take prescriptions because they're not sure if it's going to be an exemption or if it's going to be clean, if it's going to get them in trouble with UK anti-doping. So sport is an interesting area, but having met with UKAD a couple of times, UK anti-doping, what they're seeing is that people are using these drugs to improve their image, finding out that they're actually quite good with sport, and then getting in trouble with the authorities. The classic example is the young Welsh rugby player. He wants to look big on the streets when he's out and about. He wants to look good in Ibiza, and he finds out actually having that size and strength is good on the rugby field. Starts playing semi-professionally and then get picked up by UK anti-doping. And at the other end of the spectrum, we see cyclists, particularly affluent, middle-aged men who have the money and wherewithal to train, dedicate their time, buy what they need to in terms of equipment, and start to see progression through the ranks of cycling, and then need the edge. What's next? Let's lose the weight. Let's have a fat burner. Let's think about steroids or anything else like EPO. And that gets people caught out. But those are the people who are going into elite status or semi-elite status. We haven't even touched on society and the health aspect. We've heard a lot over the last 10 years about women's health and women's body image, but less so about men's body image. Love Island is back on the TVs at the moment, and you'll often hear about the debate of how the females look. Is there diversity there? What about shapes? Very rarely do you hear it about the men. 9 out of 10 of them will have a six-pack, large shoulders, big biceps. And we seem to think that's okay. Spencer Matthews from Made in Chelsea talked about the pressure he felt and the need to use steroids because of his concern of what it looks like. And we only have to look at what's currently in the cinemas with the Marvel comics to see what the aspiration is set for young men. Of course I'll give way.
Congratulate my honourable friend for bringing this debate today. Does my honourable friend agree with me that boys and men are in a unique position in the 21st century. There's all kinds of pressures on boys and men that are often not seen, and boys and men often don't talk about this as well. So would you agree with me that maybe one way the government could help with this is putting a men's health strategy in place, and we could bring subjects like this and other issues that men are facing and look at them as a whole and really help men today?
I'm very grateful to my friend's intervention, and can I commend his work on the men's health strategy, securing the Men's World Health Debate. And he's absolutely right. I do think these tend to be pertinent male issues, and there is a difference from my clinical approach. Have I seen the way men have health-seeking behaviours? And I think it's perfectly apt to be able to say we should be targeting some of these issues, particularly around steroid abuse and performance-enhancing drugs used for imaging, because it tends to be men that are most affected. Not exclusively, but mainly. And I think he's absolutely right on that basis. And that leads into the fitness industry itself, purports to put out images of the six-pack, the shoulders bigger than a fridge. The problem is they're stationary images of a point in time. Trying to aspire to live in that point of time is very difficult. And young people may not understand that many people in bodybuilding go through cycles of bulking up, then dropping weight to fit a certain image for their competitions. Now, that's fine if you're a bodybuilder, but it's not very good if you're a 19, 20-year-old university student who wants to try to aspire because they're at the time of meeting other people and creating relationships. So there's a ratchet effect going on. We're seeing images of very large muscular men that people want to aspire to, and there's a good, cheap way of getting there. And that's a real concern. And this leads on to a wider issue we're currently facing at the moment in society and across the Western world, is what is masculinity? We've heard a lot about toxic masculinity, and it allows the space for the likes of people like Andrew Tate to step in. And lots of people listen to what he has to say, because in part he's saying, be strong, stand up, look after yourself. But at the other time, he's been found to be completely wanting and under investigation. Is this the kind of role model we want in front of our young men? Well, young men who don't understand what masculinity is because they're not told with society will look for other options, be it in the Marvel comics or the likes of Andrew Tate, to be told what it is acceptable to be masculine. And that's a dangerous place we're settling. But we are waking up to the issue. The online culture has started to move into calling it out, and we have the likes of James Smith and Ben Carpenter who talk openly about the fitness industry, the pros and cons, and how it's being used in a marketing side. We've also had the Women Inequalities do a report on body image, the Health Select Committee do a report on body image, and the Advertising Standards Authority, ASA, produce an interim report which has looked at and identified the key issue of depictions of muscularity in advertising, and are hoping to have further information on Q4 in 2023. So the awareness is there, the culture is starting to think about it, but we're still at least 10 years off in the comparison to the female idea of body image. So we're not doing enough, and that comes out when you speak to the likes of UCAD. And I'd like to pay thanks to Trevor Pearce and Jane Rumble from UCAD when I met them, who gave me some of the information. Because from 2019, they surveyed their gym goers and found that 34% of gym goers are aware of iPads being used in their gym. And that's certainly my experience as a gym goer. Wherever I've been in the country, I have been aware of these kind of drugs being taken, being used, found syringes, found packets in the changing rooms. And that's quite a scary thought from my own anecdotal experience. And yet 1 in 3 men are finding that. If we look at what Medicheck did in their survey of people who go to the gym, they said 61% of men want to be bigger, 80% of men are aware of some of the side effects when it comes to steroids, yet 3 out of 4 of those men would consider using steroids or iPads. I've already mentioned earlier that 1 in 10 gym goers has bigorexia, and that's thought to be worsening. So I think back to myself, if I was that young boy with my multi-gym at the age of 15, now with an online ability to get hold of it, the ever-growing social media pressure to conform, to have those muscles, maybe I would have been tempted. And that's a scary thought for our generations that are coming through. And the Times reported in 2020 that users could easily buy steroids from Instagram. Yet this is a Class C drug. So if we look at the law, Class C means that you need to have a prescription of it. It's lawful for personal use with that prescription, but you can't distribute or supply it. In 2021, Border Force seized 1.225 million doses of anabolic steroids. And this was actually down on the few years before. But of course, that doesn't cover some of the other drugs, like the fat-stripping drugs, like clenbuterol. Yet only 37 convictions for possession or supply happened last year. And that's been about the right trend, between 30 or 40 people for the last 5 years. Now, the government's produced a drug strategy that's been updated called the 10-Year Drug Plan to Cut Crime and Save Lives. And the House of Commons Library confirmed to me that there is no mention of the words steroids or iPads in that report. And if I quote from it, at the start it says over 300,000 people are addicted to heroin and crack cocaine in England. This is the biggest section of the illegal drugs market. Well, is it? Given that we expect 500,000 people to 1 million people have it, we simply don't know. And this is the point that I'm driving at. Because in that document, it talks about the principle of putting evidence at the heart of the approach. And what we need when it comes to iPads and steroids is data and evidence. That leads me on to my ask for the government. And given that I have a health minister in front of me, I think it's fair to concentrate on simply the health aspect. And I ask for 3 things. The first is to commission the research into steroids and iPads that was suggested in the Health Select Committee report in Body Image. The second is to pull together the departments that this crosses over. This isn't a one single departmental issue. It's not simply health. It's not simply DCMS. It's not simply Home Office. It's not equalities. It's all of them and the crossover that goes with it. And we need to pull together in roundtables and a task force to think about how we deal with this. And third of all is education and awareness. We need to think about schools, outside agencies, the NHS, a bit like the government has successfully done with eating disorders. We've seen skyrocketing eating disorders, and the government's really responded well to get that information out, that support out, and look at ways to strategize. Now, we're a long way off from dealing with eating disorders, but this is the next big crisis, similar eating disorders. And so I urge the government to take that kind of strategy forward too. And it's remiss of me to come to this debate without offering wider solutions too. And so here are some ideas that need to be talked about. Now, they have merits, they have pros and cons. I'm simply raising them up because we need this conversation. But we could look at compulsory mandatory education for personal trainers, the most likely people to come into contact with gym goers. We could change the iPad laws, actually make the sentencing more severe, or actually do the opposite, take them out and say, no, this is a health issue and we need to deal with it. This is the debate that needs to happen. And if we look at the examples across the world, Norway have licensing of gyms. I put it to you, if this was the likes of a nightclub with new drugs being found at 1 in 3 persons aware of it, the authorities would be knocking on the door saying, should we be licensing? Should we revoke that license? What should we do about it? Now, we're a long way off for putting that in place, but it's not beyond the remit to have this discussion. Is that something we should do to put in responsibility for those gym owners that are there? There are pros and cons. But fundamentally, behind all this, we don't know, we don't have the data, and none of it's been explored enough. So that leads us full circle, because what we really need to do is start a conversation, because we need to talk about steroids in the UK.
Call Stuart MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Mr Mandel. It's good to see you in the chair, and thank you for calling me. And can I also start by paying particular thanks to the Honourable Member for securing this debate and for his excellent introduction to it. He spoke very passionately and eloquently, both from his own personal experience and from his professional experience, and it was very difficult for me to add very much insight to what he's already provided, and there was very little at all that I could quibble with in what he had to say. I'm just grateful to him for actually highlighting how significant an issue this is, and as a public health issue and a growing public health problem at that, not just here, but as he said, internationally, and something that I have to freely confess that I was not properly aware of. So, as he's pointed out, growing numbers are using iPads, including anabolic steroids, And it's not clear for various reasons how many precisely are doing that, but it's clearly a very significant number at all. I think the Honourable Member used the number of around 500,000. I think some numbers have been slightly higher than that, though open to criticism, but it's clearly a significant issue. A variety of sports have been implicated historically, including rugby union, rugby league, athletics and cycling, as we've heard. But also other users are now engaging in this practice simply because, for reasons of image enhancement, and that includes a growing number of gym users. Studies suggest that young men between or in their early 20s are the most likely to start down this path, and increased use appears to be assisted by comparative ease of access, as we also heard, and that seems to be particularly through online sales and postal delivery from abroad, with Border Force having previously reported annual seizures of millions of steroid doses. As we heard as well, this has significant consequences for people's health. We've heard already about problems with kidneys, liver problems, heart attacks, strokes. And as the Honourable Member for Southend pointed out, there have been very tragic cases where people have died through even comparatively low amounts of use of steroids. There are behavioural and mental health issues, mood swings, aggression, eating disorders. I will give way to a moment, friend.
The Honourable Member mentioned aggression, and it's a common side effect of steroids, roid rage, meaning it's not just those who choose to use them that are impacted, but everyone around them too, which could lead to serious life-ruining consequences all around. So does the Honourable Member agree that greater understanding of side effects is an imperative part of tackling the abuse of these drugs?
I think Honourable Crane makes a very valid point, and actually, interestingly, one report I read suggested that when you are engaging with people who are already using steroids, sometimes the most persuasive factor in getting them to reconsider and to move away from this conduct is actually speaking to them about the mental health consequences, and rather than the physical consequences, it appears to be more influential when it comes to their behaviour. So I think she makes a very interesting point there. Although most steroids, I think, are taken in pill form, if needle sharing is involved, then obviously there are other risks in terms of HIV and Hep C. Use of counterfeits also further complicates risk. And of course, there's the other consequence that if they're used in sport, then obviously unfairness is created and sporting integrity is undermined. So as has been set out, these drugs are regulated under the Medicines Act and classified C under the Misuse of Drugs Act. So the question rightly posed to us today is what more can we do? And I absolutely agree that first and foremost, and I speak from a position of weakness, we all need to improve our knowledge of this issue. Evidence has to be at the heart of the approach, as the Honourable Member said. So how better can we understand the scale and the incidence and the causation of the problems that have been highlighted, and therefore better craft a response? And as he highlighted, last August the Health Committee reported on the impact of body image on mental and physical health and recommended a national review of the growing use of anabolic steroids as it relates to body image. And that sort of research seems to me to be an absolutely essential first step. And that research then will shape our response, a response which will have to look to use a public health approach, to use education, to tackle demand and to try to close off access as best as we can. And that, of course, does indeed involve a cross-departmental approach, another very important point that the Honourable Member made. So in terms of education and campaigning, there are two sides to that coin which have been touched upon. First of all, we need to look at the material and the propaganda that is influencing and driving people to a place where they feel it is necessary or desirable to access iPads. And that includes, as members have said, media and social media. The all-prevalent perfect body images in the press, on TV, and increasingly on social media and online advertising. As has been said, these days, Mr Mandela, if you show a remote interest in trying to keep fit or even just losing a few pounds, suddenly you find yourself bombarded on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else with relentless images of what has been referred to in the past as the Love Island look, which to me seems pretty much unachievable by anyone who can't spend every waking hour in the gym unless they use iPads. So again, the Health Committee also dealt with this in its report, calling on the government to work with advertisers and to feature a wider variety of body aesthetics, and to work with industry and the Advertising Standards Authority to encourage advertisers and influencers not to doctor their images. The committee said the government should introduce legislation that ensures commercial images are labelled with a logo where any part of the body, including its proportions and skin tone, are digitally altered. Now, these all seem valuable suggestions to me that are certainly worth considering, and the Honourable Member pointed out that there has been some progress in this regard, but there is further to go. But as well as tackling the images and messages that promotes the use of these iPads, government also needs to raise awareness about the risks and how to minimise harm. And again, various committee recommendations seem sensible to me, advocating for a campaign coordinated through existing steroid user support groups in targeted areas of highest risk, such as gyms with a high proportion of bodybuilders. We need, Mr Mundell, to tackle head-on the idea that these things are not to be seen as some sort of equivalent to supplements. They very much are in a different category altogether. In relation to education, the committee heard evidence stressing the importance of education about body image for young people, both in terms of critical thinking and appraising images, but also self-worth. And again, the government should look to strengthen these areas in education settings. Another report by the Scottish Drugs Forum noted the significance of close friends as a source of iPads, and therefore suggested it could be important that peer education programmes are used to overcome this by using a community member to cascade positive health messages around. But it's not just in education, but mental health strategies need to be revisited as well, thinking about how we can support people struggling with self-esteem amidst a bombardment of images. And finally, Mr Mundell, we also need to consider appropriately targeted harm reduction advice and drug services. And there are many examples of good work, as I understand it, out there. Yorkshire and Humber have a regional steroid and iPad reference group, and Workers' Forum with over 30 people in every district represented. In Glasgow, there is an Aboriginal Performance Enhancing Drugs Clinic providing testing, needle exchange services, consultation and advice on harm reduction and alternatives. Edinburgh too now has a steroid clinic based within the harm reduction team of NHS Lothian. So again, that provides advice, services, equipment and testing, psychological services, support to stop, and with mental and physical health support. So there is good work happening in the different parts of the United Kingdom. Let's also learn from that and to seek to ensure more people around the various countries can benefit from it. That's just a few ideas. I want to close just by thanking the Honourable Member again for bringing this debate. None of us have all the answers. I certainly don't, far from it. He had lots of ideas. He highlighted that there are pros and cons to some of them. Some of them are quite bold. Some of them would be controversial, but they are definitely worth discussing. And the central point that he made is we need to have the evidence so we can have that discussion as fully informed as possible. But we should revisit this again and make sure that we are continuing to drive forward as we seek to address what is a growing public health issue.
Thank you. I now call Shadow Minister Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mundell. Pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I want to start by congratulating the member for Bosworth for securing this debate. It's a very important topic, and I think he is doing some excellent campaigning on this issue. His description of bigorexia and the impact of social media and all of the pressures on young men to get the perfect body image was very powerful, and I think it is true to say we have been talking about these issues when it comes to women for a long time, and we haven't perhaps been talking about men. I have twin boys who are 12 years old who tell me repeatedly they want a six-pack, and they do not have a six-pack, and they're not going to have one anytime soon, but they are already thinking in this way, and the influencers online, the member mentioned Andrew Tate being a particularly powerful one, are putting great pressure on our young boys. I took a group of scouts around Parliament last week, and they were all telling me how poor Andrew Tate had been badly done by, and he had been locked up in prison for no reason, and he was, and I think the point that the honourable member made about sometimes some of these men talking sense and sounding like they're all about empowering men, but on the other hand then being incredibly misogynistic and spreading awful mistruths is very true, and I see it time and again. So I think this is a really important conversation to have, and the wider conversation about the role that we can all play in developing what it means to be a man. I've done lots of debates about knife crime, and we talk about this endlessly, about the boys who feel that they have to carry knives and they have to be macho in order to be a man. boys now who go to the gym and attempted to take steroids because they feel that's what it is to be a man. The growth of, this horrific, incel movement with these men who define themselves by not being attractive and by not being able to attract women. All these things are very important, and I think the government needs to think about this in the round wider than this debate today. I think there are quite a lot of issues that we've covered in terms of what the government needs to have a think about. The first is the law. So steroids, obviously Class C drug, as has been said, so illegal to own and to sell, and possession punishable by up to 2 years in prison or a fine, and supply you can get 14 years in prison. Other drugs, the tanning drug melanotan, which I hadn't heard of until this debate, but which sounds very strange for people to want to do, are illegal to ship or to sell, but not to buy and possess. As with all classified substances, the government is responsible for clamping down on the sale and the use of these. And I think the 10-year drug plan, although we on the opposition said it didn't go far enough, it did contain quite a lot of good policies. But the fact that it didn't include any of these steroids, I think, is a miss, and perhaps the government should look again at that. The physical side effects is another issue which we've already talked about, that go way beyond what people read about when they decide that they want to get steroids, and the kind of potentially lethal impacts of the strokes or the heart attacks, as well as all of the kind of erectile dysfunction and sterility, loss of hair, all of those things. We clearly need more information to tell people what they are likely to face if they take them. And then the other aspect, which is mental health. We know that use of these kind of drugs is very high, between 500,000 and 1 million, it seems online. There's a kind of debate about this. Perhaps the 1 million number was not quite right, but it's a large number of people in the UK using steroids, and the figures from UK anti-doping that the member referred to. In a 2016 survey, 56% of steroid users said they were motivated by improving their body image. So getting stronger and fitter is not the driver here, it is the body image. And Chair, we all know the pressures to look good and to conform to shockingly rigid beauty standards are presented by the media. And Love Island, as the member said, is back on our television, and there is some real powerful pressure there that very few of us are able to ignore. I certainly worry about my weight all the time, and why would men not do the same? But we don't talk about it as much as we should. Fads, of course, come and go, and there will be new things coming on the market as soon as we tackle some of the older things. I saw recently reports of a new procedure called buccal fat removal, which takes the fat out of your cheeks, which is quite extraordinary, but apparently suddenly very popular. So surgeries and techniques and fitness tips change almost daily, but their impact on our mental health, and especially the mental health of young people, is relenting. A study in 2021 found that 54% of men displayed signs of body dysmorphia and said that low body confidence had negative effects on aspects of their lives, while 49% of women admitted to often thinking about being lean, maintaining an extreme exercise program, and feeling anxiety at missing a workout. Over 80% of those aged 18 to 24 showed at least one sign of body dysmorphia. And we've talked about many more stats than the honourable member from the representative from the SNP talked about lots of the recommendations, and we already talked about the Women and Qualities Committee that heard that over 60% of women feel negatively about their bodies, but the equivalent figure for men is not coming to the fore in the way that it should. It's important to say that there is help out there for people who need it. The eating disorder charity BEAT, or the Campaign Against Living Miserably, offer support with eating disorders, body dysmorphia and drugs. Help is out there for everyone, including men. Whatever toxic male influencers may say, there is no shame in seeking help for performance-enhancing drug use and body image issues. It is a sign of bravery and strength, not weakness. And we should be clear that alongside proper enforcement of the law to tackle the crime, we should also tackle the causes of the crime too. The next Labour government will guarantee mental health treatment within a month for all who need it. And I think that's something, a wider issue that the government needs to address. So I think the member covered most of, well, very eloquently asked questions to the Minister. And I know the Minister is a health minister, so it's hard for him to talk about Home Office issues. But of course it is the status of these things is a Home Office issue, so hopefully he can pass on this debate and what's happened within it to his Home Office colleagues. But I think there is a question about what is being done to stop the sale of these steroids. I was able to find a vast number of websites just by looking on Google, so UK Roids 24/7, henchclub.com will sell you your steroids, online steroidsuk.com, there were absolutely loads of them. And, you know, whilst selling steroids is illegal, and the government says it's acting to stop such websites, there is little evidence that actually anything much is being done on that. So I would ask the Minister, what will the Home Office do to tackle the sale of controlled iPads online? Will he look again at the 10-year drug strategy and perhaps expand it into this space? And will the government, as already has been mentioned, be commissioning a national review on steroid use as the Health Select Committee recommended? The reasons why people use steroids and other image and performance-enhancing drugs are complex, but they are illegal. They cause serious harm to physical and mental health, and this is an issue of public health as much as it is one of crime. The government, I think it's clear today, must go further. I think it's something we all need to catch up on in terms of the changing nature of these drugs that are available for people to buy, but we need to move with the speed that social media is moving and do what we can to ease the pressure on young men in particular to build their body image by using these kinds of drugs. So I'm looking forward to hear what the Minister has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Reminding you that we can go to 5:38, but obviously leaving some time for Dr Evans to wind up.
Well, thank you, Mr Mundell. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and it was a pleasure to listen to my honourable friend from Bosworth. I knew as soon as he secured this debate that he would bring us something very special, and he didn't disappoint. It was a fascinating speech. And without wishing to spoil the impact of my response to it, there are so many good questions and important ideas that I will not be able to fully bottom all of them out in this speech this afternoon, but we should see it as the start of a conversation which I'm keen to pursue with him. And likewise, so many other important and very interesting observations from other members here today, including the issues about roid rage by the member for Rutherglen and Hamilton West, the comments about the position of young men in society today from my honourable friend in Don Valley, and the tragic case, which I was sorry to hear about, of Matt, raised by my honourable friend for Rochford and Southend East, which I'm sure our hearts go out to his parents and family. First, I'd like to touch on some of the positive steps that we took actually last week in terms of the substance misuse and recovery strategy, the 10-year drug strategy. Now, my honourable friend raised the point that there's a heavy focus in that on alcohol, on heroin and crack, and the reasons for that are obvious, and indeed, as part of the launch of that, I met my honourable friend who's here from Central Suffolk, who will appreciate, because of the way those drugs drive about half of all acquisitive crime, there's a big focus on them, and alcohol is one of the big killers, one of the big addictions, which causes so many problems too. But that 10-year drug strategy, as part of it, we have created a ministerial working group across departments of exactly the kind that my honourable friend talked about creating, and absolutely there is every reason to look through that at what we can all collectively do on particularly the illegal sale of some of these drugs. Just to mention a bit about that strategy, this is a 421 million investment over the next 2 years to improve the number of places in recovery and treatment. I can use this opportunity cheekily to thank everyone working in the drug and alcohol treatment sector for all the fantastic work they're already doing, and there's of course many other things that we want to extend out to that my honourable friend has raised today. So, as my honourable friend mentioned, there are huge I'm very happy to give way, absolutely.
Dr. Coulter.
For giving way, and I draw Ms Mandel, your attention and members' attention to my declaration of members' interests. I'm a practicing addiction psychiatrist. Can I just thank very much my honourable friend for the focus he's bringing to bear on this area, and the fact the government has put in place a comprehensive strategy for the next 10 years to focus on particularly alcohol, crack and cocaine and opiate use, which is absolutely the right focus. And can I thank him for the fact that that strategy is backed up with substantial investment, which is very much needed, and I'm sure will make a very big difference over time. On one particular point, though, that was raised, which is on data collection, we do not have very good data collection for steroid use or perhaps the misuse of steroids. And I just wondered that a good way of collecting data about drug use in the general population is through the crime survey for England and Wales. And I wondered whether that would be something you may be able to take away from this debate in order to collect some more robust data on this, as ensuring that steroid use could be properly captured in that crime survey going forwards, and perhaps have conversations with his colleagues and other government departments, because that will give us a much stronger basis to work from, and the evidence base. This is important in drug and alcohol treatment.
Absolutely. My honourable friend brings huge expertise to this debate, and he is right, and my honourable friend from Bosworth are right that we need to get better data. Perhaps one route is, as my honourable friend suggests, through the CSEW. It may be that there are other routes of getting to better data on prevalence, limits to how much people report on some of these crimes where the person is taking it themselves, rather than necessarily stealing to fund it. But there may be different ways we can get to the right data. At the moment, in terms of what we know, this is a small cohort, and it's estimated that only 0.2% of people aged between 16 and 59 use steroids. However, these individuals, as my honourable friend and other members have pointed out, might not be fully aware of the health risks associated with the drug, or the impact that it can have on either their mental or their physical health. And as members here certainly know, anabolic steroids are prescription-only medicine which help patients gain weight and rebuild tissues that become weak because of serious injury or illness. That's their clinical use. And these drugs are sometimes taken without medical advice to try and improve muscle mass or athletic performance. Anabolic steroids are a Class C drug under the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971. And though it's not illegal to possess them for personal use, possession, importation and exportation is illegal if it's deemed that that is with the intent to supply others. So people who are involved in doing this need to be extremely careful. Chair, there is lots of work underway across multiple departments on this important issue, and I'd like to talk about just some of the actions that the government is currently taking, notwithstanding the need to do more on a range of these fronts. The government is committed to stopping the illegal trade in human medicines. The majority of iPads are sold online through illegal trading websites that are based overseas. The MHRA works with private sector partners to try and reduce the presence of these websites, and with the Home Office Border Force intercept and seize medicines entering the UK. And the Online Safety Bill is also taking action to prevent criminal activity, including the illegal sale of steroids. The intention is that if companies fail to comply with the bill once it's enacted, they'll face stiff financial penalties, or in the most serious cases, having their sites blocked by the independent regulator Ofcom. And I hope that can address some of the concerns about the frightening sounding websites the opposition front bench mentioned. We know, of course, that preventing the trade in steroids is not enough to tackle this. The wider issue does, as my honourable friend quite rightly said, lie with increased prevalence of body dysmorphia and societal preference for young men to look a particular way. And the rise, of course, of social media has undoubtedly increased this pressure in recent years, as young people have greater access to platforms promoting often unrealistic and digitally altered body images. Schools play a really important role in helping young people to make positive choices about their well-being through their compulsory relationship, sex and health education curriculum. And the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, OHID, has worked with the Department of Education to try and create quality teaching resources for teachers to help prevent substance abuse and to try and address some of these issues about young people feeling like they should look in this completely unrealistic way. And I hope also to pick up on some of the horrifying point that the Honourable Opposition front bench raised about the young scouts that she'd met who were all fans of Andrew Tate. Completely terrifying, and something we do need to get at in education in schools. as well as informing students about the risks associated with harmful substances, to the point that my honourable friend raised about harm reduction as well as prevalence reduction, schools have a very important duty to protect pupils from harm and provide mental and physical health support. And through statutory health education, secondary school pupils are taught about the similarities and differences between the online world and the physical world, including how people may curate a particular image of their life online, how information is targeted at them, and how to be a discerning consumer of information online. I'm always, of course, interested in how we can improve what is taught in schools, because the world facing young people is so different to the world that many people in the generation of people who are represented here experienced when they were young. And I'm also proud to highlight that the government has committed to offer all state schools and colleges a grant to train a senior mental health lead by 2025. That will enable schools to introduce effective whole school approaches to mental health and well-being. Backed by £10 million in 22-23 this year, over 8,000 schools and colleges have taken up the offer so far. We're also making significant steps to tackle body image issues. On the 2nd of February, the government responded to the Health and Social Care Committee's important report on the impact of body image on mental and physical health. We welcomed the committee's report and recommendations, agreeing with the committee that image and performance-enhancing drugs are a significant public health issue. But we know that prevention is better than cure, and when it comes to harmful substances, it's crucial we ensure the public have access to sufficient information to inform them of the harms associated with substances like steroids. And the government-commissioned website Talk to Frank provides detailed information on the mental and physical health risks of taking steroids, and it's updated on a regular basis. In addition, UK Anti-Doping already has an outreach and communication programme run in partnership with UK Active, which has been live since 2018. And this partnership aims to improve the education and awareness around image and performance-enhancing drugs in gyms and in leisure centres, because my honourable friend rightly pointed out this is such a kind of centre for these kind of issues, and it's the right place to target, to try and work with sporting bodies and gyms and the like to try and tackle these problems where they're most concentrated. And Mr. Mundell, finally, I'd like to draw members' attention to the investment that we are making into mental health services. The government will have invested 2.3 billion a year by 2024, expanding the services available in England, including for people with body dysmorphic disorder. An additional 54 million is also being invested into children and young people's community eating disorder services in 22-23 this year. And this investment is alongside the development of a major condition strategy that will address prevention to treatment for mental ill health, with an aim of producing an interim report by this summer. Mr. Mundell, I'd once again like to thank the Honourable Member for Bosworth genuinely for bringing forward this debate on a hugely important issue, and with his many, many ideas about the whole suite of things that we need to be doing on all these things. It was a fascinating speech and intervention. I'd love to commend his work in this area, including his image campaign last year, which achieved national media coverage and will no doubt have had a beneficial impact directly in and of itself. The government is taking significant steps to protect the mental health of the nation, particularly for young people, and ensuring the right supports in place for both suffering and those at risk of body dysmorphic issues. While the review is not currently planned, DHSC, DFE and DCMS will continue to work closely on tackling the use of anabolic steroids and educate the public on the risks associated with them, as well as ensuring that mental health support is available for all those who need it.
Dr. Evans to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Mundell, for your chairmanship, and thank you to the two chairs that we've had during this debate, the clerks for staying late and the private officers for being here as well. And I'd like to thank the members for Rutherglen, Hamilton and West for her talk about algorithms and body image, for Rochford and Southend East, who is no longer in his place, but the sad case of Matt, to the member for Don Valley and his constant campaign for men's health is fantastic, and to the member from Central Suffolk and North Ipswich for his right point, which is bang on there. It's about data and how we record it. Turning to the SNP spokesman, I'm very grateful for his point about bold ideas, and I think this is the whole point about having this discussion, that no stone should be left unturned without having these bold discussions. They may not be right, but they need to be explored because that's the key thing to do when trying to deal with this issue. And to the Shadow Minister, I'm glad to hear about her twins, and I think this is exactly the kind of conversations that people should be having up and down the country. If you are a mother, a father, a granddaughter, a grandfather, grandmother, asking these questions about what young people are aware of and what they're seeing. Because at the end of the day, it's lovely to come into a debate after 3 years to hear unanimously across the House there is support for this, the desire to fill the void, which seems to be the worry about the likes of Andrew Tate who will step into it. And I'd love to take the Minister up on his keen pursuit, to quote him, in dealing with this topic, because I think at the end of the day, we're at the start of a road. This is all about having a conversation about steroids in the UK.
Is that this House has considered the matter of steroid and image and performance-enhancing drug use. As many as of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.